In this video, I want to talk about why a lacrosse ball is something that I feel every single person worried about their health and fitness should have, and why it just may be the best few pounds that you ever spend. So stay tuned. Thanks for checking out the channel. My name's John, I'm the head therapist at John W Sports Injury, and here on this channel I want to help you to understand your body to ultimately remove your pain in order to achieve any of your health and fitness goals. And speaking about removing pain, possibly one of my favourite bits of equipment that I think everybody should have is a lacrosse ball. So firstly, let me explain why. Now, there can't be a one size fits all when it comes to massage pieces of equipment. Anybody who works with me in clinic will know that I have a variety of tools, and that's because I think that they all have a different purpose. And in order to make muscle tissue feel healthy or as reliable or as productive as possible, I think that there's varying things that we need to do to it. But if I had to pick just one piece of equipment to cover as many of my bases as I could for somebody looking to keep themselves healthy, fit and well-being at home, then I would go for a lacrosse ball. Firstly, one of the things I love about it is the price. It's incredibly inexpensive. A quick Amazon search at the time of recording this video means that you can pick these up for less than £5. But I feel that it's so multi-use in the amount of ways we can apply it to the body. But where this really comes into play is around what we might term trigger point therapy. So what is a trigger point, or something that you might know as a knot? And I think this is important to understand before we dive into understanding why I think these are so helpful. So a trigger point or a knot is an area of muscle tissue that has become perhaps slightly damaged and then not repaired correctly, and we can form these bundles of muscle fibers in the area. Now, we all have them in our bodies, but some of these can become problematic, or what we might term active trigger points. And when we're looking to work with somebody in clinic and we're looking to use our manual skills, one of the key things that we're looking to do is to locate these areas of tension. And what we want to then do is desensitize these areas of tension so that the muscle can be more effective and ultimately the person's pain can be reduced. Now, this is where I think these come in fantastically well. And let me compare these to a second to something like a foam roller, which again, what we're looking to do with the foam roller is loosen out tissue, encourage a blood supply and all those things, which it does do well. But what a lacrosse ball allows us, and the key thing that I want to talk about today, is specificity. Now, when we're working on a muscle, what I'm really looking to do is to locate these specific small points, or what I often term the epicenter of the problem. And a foam roller has a larger surface area, so it's more difficult to do this. If you think of the classic massage therapists, and they might be working away with their thumbs, and because what we're looking to do is become really localized onto an area. And so if we compare then the ball, what that allows us to do is have a much smaller surface area, so we can be located onto the specific part of the muscle that needs attention. And also what I love is about that we can so easily utilize these on multiple parts of the body, and for me, key parts of the body that I think are often ignored. So what I would encourage you to do is pick up one of these lacrosse balls. Why a lacrosse ball? Well, a lacrosse ball provides quite a lot of density to it, more density than something like a tennis ball. People often ask me, can I use a tennis ball? Now, the downside to a tennis ball is once we start to apply pressure, what's going to happen is the tennis ball is actually going to squeak, and it's not going to give that force back into the muscle that we need. There are stronger things like cricket balls or hockey balls, but sometimes these can almost be too dense. But if you're feeling particularly brave and you have one of those lying around the house, these same principles that we're going to talk about can be applied. What we find with a lacrosse ball is it just has that slight give to it. Not a lot of give, but just enough that makes it slightly more forgiving and more comfortable on the person when they're looking to utilize it. So now that we have that ball ready to get to work, what muscles can we use this on, or what are the key areas that I tend to recommend? So firstly, if I start from the top of the body and work my way down as to how I would utilize it on somebody, a key area in a lot of people is the back of the shoulder blade area. This makes up part of what we call the rotator cuff. And what tends to happen over time, particularly if we're a desk-based worker or a manual worker, is that we can develop rounded shoulders. Now what then happens is that leaves the muscles at the back under increased tension, more susceptible to damage and ultimately becoming weaker, leaving themselves vulnerable to injury. So we can develop these trigger points or these soreness or over time actually reduce the amount of range of motion that we have. So what I would encourage you to do is take the ball, and what you want to do is place this onto the floor. Now you can do this in standing or in lying, but in lying you're going to get the better work. Place the ball onto the floor and then lie onto the ball. Now, what we want to do is move around on the ball until you find those sore points. Once you find a sore point, simply hold on that point. And what you should start to feel after about 30 seconds is that muscle starts to desensitize. You start to feel that tension easing. At this point, I would encourage you to do a stretch. So you can see here by just stretching out that arm, what it's allowing that to do is use the pressure of the ball into the muscle while we then stretch the tissue over the top. And this method is what I term the pin and stretch. And this is what we're going to talk about throughout the rest of this video, applying it to other muscle groups. So we use the pressure of the ball to apply the pin, we let the muscle desensitize, and then we look to stretch the tissue over the top to ultimately look to break down and increase the pliability of that tissue. So the back of the shoulder is a really helpful area, but we can also look to work into the front of the chest. Again, we can do this in standing or lying, but this is an area that typically gets tight when we're, again, working at a desk, these types of things where we develop these rounded shoulders. So you can lay flat onto the ball, place the ball into that chest area and move yourself around on the ball, working it through the chest muscle. But once you feel a sore point, you'll notice the change in your pain receptors. You'll notice when you're on one of these trigger points or knots, and we just hold on there. Once you feel that desensitizing happening, then we can look to stretch out that muscle by stretching our arms forwards. Moving down the body, another key area that I love to use the ball on is a QL muscle, what we term the quadratus lumborum. Why are these muscles so problematic? Well, they live in between the top of our pelvis and our lowest rib. They form a square shape on the lower back, but they also hang on to our lumbar vertebrae. So it's very common to develop dysfunction in these muscles that can become very tight or overactive. So with this, if we place the ball on the floor and we lie sideways onto the ball, this will allow you to get into this deeper muscle more easily. Move around, find those sore points. Once you're on the sore points, hold on there, let the muscle desensitize, and again, look to stretch the arm forwards and you'll feel those muscles stretching out underneath the pressure of the ball. Moving further down the body, anybody who knows me well clinically will know I like to talk about the glutes a lot. I often find a lot of dysfunction that causes problems further down or up the body into the lower back. The ball worked fantastically well at working into these glutes. What we look to do here is literally sit onto the ball, and that will find that ball in the middle of the gluteal or bottom area. Then what we look to do is turn our body from a seated position into a 45 degrees tilted position, and you'll feel that ball making its way through the glute as it moves out towards your hip bone. We can then move a little bit higher, we can move a little bit lower, but what we'll be able to find is it will make it so that we can locate those sore points, find those sore points and look to desensitize those and roll those through. We can also then look to use those on the front of the hips. This one can be a little bit more sensitive, so take your time with this one, but by placing the ball into the front of the hip, what we can be looking to do here is to really locate what we call our hip flexors. Now, one way I try to find the hip flexors is think of our belly button and move 2 fingers to the side towards the hips and 2 fingers down, and you're going to be in and around that kind of hip flexory area. These can be very sensitive, but if you find a sore point, same principles apply. Hold the ball into that area and then look to lift the leg off the floor into hip extension. And what we're doing here is using the ball to try and desensitize that tissue in order to allow for the muscles to have more range of motion. So moving further down the body, another area where I think these work particularly well is around the calf muscle. So we can place the ball on the floor and place the calf onto the ball. We roll that ball around looking at the outside and the inside of the muscle and try and locate those sore points. Once you find a sore point, what you want to do is hold the pressure onto the ball, and this time in order to stretch, we just point our toes towards our shins. Finally, a really common area to become dysfunctional, sore, but the ball can have a fantastic effect on is what we term your plantar fascia. This is the base layer of the foot. So this works quite well in a seated position, but placing the ball onto the floor and simply putting your foot onto the ball. And what we're looking to do now is to roll through those tissues. Particularly in and around the arch of the foot, you might find some sensitivity into that area. You can use the ball to look to break up that tight tissue, and that can be really helpful in relieving some of the symptoms of plantar fasciitis. So that's some of the key areas. There are more areas that can be used. I didn't mention the quads, hamstrings. Those things could all be applied to use of the ball, but I wanted to mention my favourite areas. And hopefully you can start to see why, for just a few pounds, these could be a really helpful thing to have. One, from recovering from injury, but also to prevent injury. I'm always a big believer in prehab being better than rehab. So I'd encourage one of these to have in your kit bag. They're so portable, you can take them wherever you go, and I think they work fantastically well. Was this helpful for you? Do you use a lacrosse ball? Are you encouraged to go and get one now? Drop me a comment, let me know how you find it. I'd love to hear your feedback. But if this video has been helpful, and if you're someone who likes to use a lacrosse ball, look after yourselves, do me a favour and hit that like button, because that tells me that this is the sort of content that you want, and it helps others to find out just why I love a lacrosse ball so much. And if you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, why not? I want to be bringing you as many tips, tricks, helpful ways that you can be improving your health and fitness and achieving your goals. So if you like these type of videos, hit that subscribe button, because then I'll keep you updated as soon as we bring out new content regularly. I hope that's been helpful, and I look forward to speaking to you soon.